Vision is the art of seeing what is invisible to others. A wise man should have money in his head, but not in his heart. May you live all the days of your life. My nose itched, and I knew I should drink wine or kiss a fool. There are few, very few, that will own themselves in a mistake. It is in men as in soils where sometimes there is a vein of gold which the owner knows not. A tavern is a place where madness is sold by the bottle. As love without esteem is capricious and volatile, esteem without love is languid and cold. I wonder what fool it was that first invented kissing. Censure is the tax a man pays to the public for being eminent. Satire is a sort of glass, wherein beholders do generally discover everybody's face but their own. The lack of belief is a defect that ought to be concealed when it cannot be overcome. Under this window in stormy weather I marry this man and woman together. Let none but him who rules the thunder put this man and woman asunder. A lie does not consist in the indirect position of words, but in the desire and intention, by false speaking, to deceive and injure your neighbor. I never knew a man come to greatness or eminence who lay abed late in the morning. We have enough religion to make us hate, but not enough to make us love one another. The proper words in the proper places are the true definition of style. Better belly burst than good liquor be lost. There is nothing constant in this world but inconsistency. Vanity is a mark of humility rather than of pride. He was a bold man that first ate an oyster. Good manners is the art of making those people easy with whom we converse. Whoever makes the fewest people uneasy is the best bread in the room. When a true genius appears, you can know him by this sign, that all the dunces are in a confederacy against him. It is a maxim among these lawyers, that whatever hath been done before, may legally be done again, and therefore they take special care to record all the decisions formerly made against common justice and the general reason of mankind. The best doctors in the world are Dr. Diet, Dr. Quiet, and Dr. Merriman. Nothing is so great an example of bad manners as flattery. If you flatter all the company, you please none. If you flatter only one or two, you offend the rest. Blessed is he who expects nothing, for he shall never be disappointed. Power is no blessing in itself, except when it is used to protect the innocent. Most sorts of diversion in men, children and other animals, are in imitation of fighting. We are so fond on one another because our ailments are the same. Human brutes, like other beasts, find snares and poison in the provision of life, and are allured by their appetites to their destruction. For in reason, all government without the consent of the governed is the very definition of slavery. A man should never be ashamed to own that he has been in the wrong, which is but saying, that he is wiser today than yesterday. Where I am not understood, it shall be concluded that something very useful and profound is couched underneath. Promises and pie crust are made to be broken. I never wonder to see men wicked, but I often wonder to see them not ashamed. Although men are accused of not knowing their own weakness, yet perhaps few know their own strength. It is in men as in soils, where sometimes there is a vein of gold which the owner knows not of. One enemy can do more hurt than 10 friends can do good. No wise man ever wished to be younger. I never saw, heard, nor read, that the clergy were beloved in any nation where Christianity was the religion of the country. Nothing can render them popular, but some degree of persecution. What they do in heaven we are ignorant of. What they do not do we are told expressly. There were many times my pants were so thin I could sit on a dime and tell if it was heads or tails. Politics, as the word is commonly understood, are nothing but corruptions. He was a fiddler, and consequently a rogue. Principally I hate and detest that animal called man, although I heartily love John, Peter, Thomas, and so forth. The stoical scheme of supplying our wants by lopping off our desires, is like cutting off our feet when we want shoes. The power of fortune is confessed only by the miserable, for the happy impute all their success to prudence or merit. Words are but wind, and learning is nothing but words, ergo, learning is nothing but wind. The latter part of a wise person's life is occupied with curing the follies, prejudices and false opinions they contracted earlier. A wise person should have money in their head, but not in their heart. No man was ever so completely skilled in the conduct of life, as not to receive new information from age and experience. Poor nations are hungry, and rich nations are proud, and pride and hunger will ever be at variance. The want of belief is a defect that ought to be concealed when it cannot be overcome. Invention is the talent of youth, as judgment is of age. It is impossible that anything so natural, so necessary, and so universal as death, should ever have been designed by Providence as an evil to mankind. Nothing is so hard for those who abound in riches as to conceive how others can be in want. Interest is the spur of the people, but glory that of great souls. Invention is the talent of youth, and judgment of age. Once kick the world, and the world and you will live together at a reasonably good understanding. If heaven had looked upon riches to be a valuable thing, it would not have given them to such a scoundrel. Positiveness is a good quality for preachers and speakers because, whoever shares his thoughts with the public will convince them as he himself appears convinced. Laws are like cobwebs, which may catch small flies, but let wasps and hornets break through. Every man desires to live long, but no man wishes to be old. Men are happy to be laughed at for their humor, but not for their folly. It is the folly of too many to mistake the echo of a London coffee-house for the voice of the kingdom. Lord! I wonder what fool it was that first invented kissing. She wears her clothes as if they were thrown on with a pitchfork. She wears her clothes as if they are thrown on with a pitchfork. Some men, under the notion of weeding out prejudices, eradicate virtue, honesty, and religion. She looks as if butter wouldn't melt in her mouth. Most sorts of diversion in men, children and other animals, are an imitation of fighting. Men are contented to be laughed at for their wit, but not for their folly. May you live every day of your life. One of the very best rules of conversation is to never say anything which any of the company wish had been left unsaid. One of the best rules in conversation is, never to say a thing which any of the company can reasonably wish had been left unsaid. Politics, as the word is commonly understood, are nothing but corruption. Censure is the tax a man pays to the public for being eminent. I have almost done with harridans, and shall soon become old enough to fall in love with girls of 14. If a proud man makes me keep my distance, the comfort is that he keeps his at the same time. He was a bold man that first eat on oyster. He was a bold man that first eat an oyster. Laws are best explained, interpreted and applied by those whose interest and abilities lie in perverting, confounding and eluding them. Our passions are like convulsion fits, which, though they make us stronger for the time, leave us the weaker ever after. Whoever makes 2 ears of corn, or 2 blades of grass to grow where only one grew before, deserves better of mankind, and does more essential service to his country than the whole race of politicians put together. When the belly is full, the bones would be at rest. Usually speaking, the worst bred person in company is a young traveler just returned from abroad. When the world has once begun to use us ill, it afterwards continues the same treatment with less scruple or ceremony, as men do to a whore. Coffee makes us severe, and grave and philosophical. Small causes are sufficient to make a man uneasy, when great ones are not in the way, for want of a block he will stumble at a straw. 'Tis an old maxim in the schools, that flattery's the food of fools, yet now and then your men of wit will condescend to take a bit. When a true genius appears in this world, you may know him by this sign, that the dunces are all in confederacy against him. When men grow virtuous in their old age, they are merely making a sacrifice to God of the devil's leavings. Faith. He must make his stories shorter or change his comrades once a quarter. What they do in heaven we are ignorant of, what they do not we are told expressly. Vision is the art of seeing things invisible. War is the child of pride, and pride the daughter of riches. It was a bold person that first ate an oyster. So, naturalists observe, a flea hath smaller fleas that on him prey, and these have smaller still to bite him, and so proceed ad infinitum. Pretense is the overrating of any kind of knowledge we pretend to. Proper words in proper places make the true definition of style. Proper words in proper places make the true definition of style. Promises and pie crusts are made to be broken. Style may be defined as the proper words in the proper places. So weak thou art that fools thy power despise, and yet so strong, thou triumph'st o'er the wise. Deaf, giddy, helpless, left alone, to all my friends a burden grown, no more I hear my church's bell than if it rang out for my knell, at thunder now no more I start than at the rumbling of a cart. A wise man is never less alone than when he is alone. Taverns are places where madness is sold by the bottle. Nothing is so hard for those who abound in riches to conceive how others can be in want. That's as well said as if I had said it myself. Indeed, madam, your ladyship is very sparing of your tea. I protest the last I took was no more than water bewitched. In all distresses of our friends we first consult our private ends. How is it possible to expect mankind to take advice when they will not so much as take warning? Happiness is a perpetual possession of being well deceived. All fits of pleasure are balanced by an equal degree of pain or languor. It is like spending this year part of the next year's revenues. The greatest inventions were produced in the times of ignorance, as the use of the compass, gunpowder, and printing. Surely mortal man is a broomstick. Possession, they say, is 11 points of the law. Tell truth, and shame the devil. It is very unfair in any writer to employ ignorance and malice together, because it gives his answerer double work. Atlas, we read an ancient song, was so exceeding tall and strong, he bore the skies upon his back, just as the peddler does his pack. But, as the peddler overpressed unloads upon a stall to rest, or, when he can no longer stand, desires a friend to lend a hand, so Atlas, lest the ponderous spheres should sink, and fall about his ears, got Hercules to bear the pile, that he might sit and rest awhile. Modesty may make a fool seem a man of sense. A pleasant companion is as good as a coach. Neither is it safe to count upon the weakness of any man's understanding, who is thoroughly possessed of the spirit of revenge to sharpen his invention. Conversation is but carving. Give no more to every guest than he's able to digest. A college joke to cure the dumps. If you are not reasoned into your beliefs, you cannot be reasoned out of them. A true critic, in the perusal of a book, is like a dog at a feast, whose thoughts and stomach are wholly set upon what the guests fling away, and consequently is apt to snarl most when there are the fewest bones. My father had a small estate in Nottinghamshire. I was the third of 5 sons. Flattery is the worst and falsest way of showing our esteem. What religion is he of? Why, he is an Enethingarian. Had Wyndham possessed discretion in debate, or Sheridan in conduct, they might have ruled their age. There is no talent so useful toward rising in the world, or which puts men more out of the reach of fortune, than that quality generally possessed by the dullest sort of men, and in common speech called discretion, a species of lower prudence, by the assistance of which, people of the meanest intellectuals, without any other qualification, pass through the world in great tranquillity, and with universal good treatment, neither giving nor taking offense. I am convinced that if the virtuosi could once find out a world in the moon, with a passage to it, our women would wear nothing but what directly came from thence. Conscience signifies that knowledge which a man hath of his own thoughts and actions, and because, if a man judgeth fairly of his actions by comparing them with the law of God, his mind will approve or condemn him. This knowledge or conscience may be both an accuser and a judge. It is not so much the being exempt from faults as the having overcome them that is an advantage to us, it being with the follies of the mind as with weeds of a field, which if destroyed and consumed upon the place where they grow, enrich and improve it more than if none had ever sprung there. Though fear should lend him pinions like the wind, yet swifter fate will seize him from behind. How often do we contradict the right rules of reason in the whole course of our lives? Reason itself is true and just, but the reason of every particular man is weak and wavering, perpetually swayed and turned by his interests, his passions, and his vices. Silks, velvets, calicos, and the whole lexicon of female fopperies. Imaginary evils soon become real ones by indulging our reflections on them, as he who in a melancholy fancy sees something like a face on the wall or the wainscot can, by 2 or 3 touches with a lead pencil, make it look visible, and agreeing with what he fancied. Rhetoric in serious discourses is like the flowers in corn, pleasing to those who come only for amusement, but prejudicial to him who would reap profit from it. A traveler's chief aim should be to make men wiser and better, and to improve their minds by the bad as well as good example of what they deliver concerning foreign places. In oratory the greatest art is to hide art. Neither are any wars so furious and bloody, or of so long continuance as those occasioned by difference in opinion, especially if it be in things indifferent. Wise people are never less alone than when they are alone. An idle reason lessens the weight of the good ones you gave before. Books, like men their authors, have no more than one way of coming into the world, but there are 10,000 to go out of it, and return no more. Men of wit, learning, and virtue might strike out every offensive or unbecoming passage from plays. The greatest inventions were produced in times of ignorance, as the use of the compass, gunpowder, and printing, and by the dullest nation, as the Germans. The worthiest people are the most injured by slander, as is the best fruit which the birds have been pecking at. So, naturalists observe, a flea hath smaller fleas that on him prey, and these have smaller fleas to bite, and so proceed ad infinitum. By the laws of God, of nature, of nations, and of your country you are and ought to be as free a people as your brethren in England. the two noblest of things, which are sweetness and light. The bulk of mankind is as well equipped for flying as thinking. Philosophy. The lumber of the schools. A child will make 2 dishes at an entertainment for friends, and when the family dines alone, the fore or hind quarter will mock ye a reasonable dish, and seasoned with a little pepper or salt, will be very good boiled on the 4th day, especially in winter. I have always a sacred veneration for anyone I observe to be a little out of repair in his person, as supposing him either a poet or a philosopher. The reason why so few marriages are happy is because young ladies spend their time in making nets, not in making cages. Every dog must have his day. I have been assured by a very knowing American of my acquaintance in London, that a young healthy child well nursed is at a year old a most delicious, nourishing, and wholesome food, whether stewed, roasted, baked, or boiled, and I make no doubt that it will equally serve in a fricassee or a ragout. For to enter the palace of learning at the great gate requires an expense of time and forms. Therefore men of much haste and little ceremony are content to get in by the back door. There is nothing in this world constant, but inconstancy. Ale is meat, drink and cloth, it will make a cat speak and a wise man dumb. Although the devil be the father of lies, he seems, like other great inventors, to have lost much of his reputation by the continual improvements that have been made upon him. Don't set your wit against a child. This made me reflect, how vain an attempt it is for a man to endeavor to do himself honor among those who are out of all degree of equality or comparison with him. Complaint is the largest tribute heaven receives and the sincerest part of our devotion. And surely one of the best rules in conversation is, never to say a thing which any of the company can reasonably wish had been left unsaid. Punning is an art of harmonious jingling upon words, which, passing in at the ears, excites a titillary motion in those parts, and this, being conveyed by the animal spirits into the muscles of the face, raises the cockles of the heart. When I am reading a book, whether wise or silly, it seems to me to be alive and talking to me. I'm as old as my tongue and a little older than my teeth. Books, the children of the brain. Religion seems to have grown an infant with age, and requires miracles to nurse it, as it had in its infancy. Just get the right syllable in the proper place. Then, rising with Aurora's light, the muse invoked, sit down to write, blot out, correct, insert, refine, enlarge, diminish, interline. A lie is an excuse guarded. Wisdom is a fox who, after long hunting, will at last cost you the pains to dig out. It is a cheese, which, by how much the richer, has the thicker, the homelier, and the coarser coat, and whereof to a judicious palate, the maggots are best. It is a sack posset, wherein the deeper you go, you'll find it the sweeter. Wisdom is a hen, whose cackling we must value and consider, because it is attended with an egg. But lastly, it is a nut, which, unless you choose with judgment, may cost you a tooth, and pay you with nothing but a worm. If it were a rainy day, a drunken vigil, a fit of the spleen, a course of physic, sleepy Sunday, an ill run at dice, a long tailor's bill, a beggar's purse, a factious head, a hot sun, costive diet, want of books, and a just contempt for learning, but for these, the number of authors and of writing would dwindle away to a degree most woeful to behold. If a lump of soot falls into the soup and you cannot conveniently get it out, stir it well in and it will give the soup a French taste. I have ever hated all nations, professions, and communities, and all my love is toward individuals. For instance, I hate the tribe of lawyers. But I love counselor such a one, and judge such a one. So with physicians, I will not speak of my own trade, soldiers, English, Scotch, French, and the rest. But principally I hate and detest that animal called man, although I heartily love John, Peter, Thomas, and so forth. This is the system upon which I have governed myself many years, but do not tell. And he gave it for his opinion, that whoever could make 2 ears of corn, or 2 blades of grass, to grow upon a spot of ground where only one grew before, would deserve better of mankind, and do more essential service to his country, than the whole race of politicians put together. It is useless to attempt to reason a man out of a thing he was never reasoned into. It is pleasant to observe how free the present age is in laying taxes on the next. Future ages shall talk of this, they shall be famous to all posterity, whereas their time and thoughts will be taken up about present things, as ours are now. The various opinions of philosophers have scattered through the world as many plagues of the mind as Pandora's box did those of the body, only with this difference, that they have not left hope at the bottom. The tiny Lilliputians surmise that Gulliver's watch may be his god, because it is that which, he admits, he seldom does anything without consulting. That the universe was formed by a fortuitous concourse of atoms, I will no more believe than that the accidental jumbling of the alphabet would fall into a most ingenious treatise of philosophy. A nice man is a man of nasty ideas. Argument is the worst sort of conversation. I do despise me, I'm the prouder for it, I like to be despised. It is the talent of human nature to run from one extreme to another. There are few wild beasts more to be dreaded than a talking man having nothing to say. You should never be ashamed to admit you have been wrong. It only proves you are wiser today than yesterday. War, that mad game the world so loves to play. We of this age have discovered a shorter, and more prudent method to become scholars and wits, without the fatigue of reading or of thinking. Many a truth is told in jest. You cannot reason a person out of a position he did not reason himself into in the first place. Falsehood flies, and the truth comes limping after it. The most ignorant person, at a reasonable charge, and with a little bodily labor, might write books in philosophy, poetry, politics, laws, mathematics, and theology, without the least assistance from genius or study. I must complain the cards are ill shuffled till I have a good hand. Falsehood flies, and truth comes limping after it, so that when men come to be undeceived, it is too late, the jest is over, and the tale hath had its effect. The first springs of great events, like those of great rivers, are often mean and little. We have an intuitive sense of our duty. Ah, a German and a genius. A prodigy, admit him. I said there was a society of men among us, bred up from their youth in the art of proving by words multiplied for the purpose, that white is black, and black is white, according as they are paid. To this society all the rest of the people are as slaves. 111 Company is like a dog, who dirts those most whom he loves best. Polite conversation. Why, everyone one as they like, as the good woman said when she kissed her cow. Faith, that's as well said as if I had said it myself. This wine should be eaten, it is too good to be drunk. The atheists, libertines, despisers of religion, that is to say all those who usually pass under the name of freethinkers. Religion supposed heaven and hell, the word of God, and sacraments, and 20 other circumstances which, taken seriously, are a wonderful check to wit and humor. It is a maxim, that those, to whom everybody allows the second place, have an undoubted title to the first. Men of great parts are often unfortunate in the management of public business, because they are apt to go out of the common road by the quickness of their imagination. They say fish should swim thrice *******. First it should swim in the sea, do you mind me, then it should swim in butter, and at last, sirrah, it should swim in good claret. Observation is an old man's memory. Hail, follow, well met, all dirty and wet, find out, if you can, who's master, who's man. I have heard of a man who had a mind to sell his house, and therefore carried a piece of brick in his pocket, which he shewed as a pattern to encourage purchasers. A forward critic often dupes us with sham quotations peri hupsos, and if we have not read Longinus, will magisterially outshine us. Then, lest with Greek he overrun ye, procure the book For Love or Money, translated from Boileau's translation, and quote quotation on quotation. It is with wits as with razors, which are never so apt to cut those they are employed on as when they have lost their edge. The tucked-up sempstress walks with hasty strides, while streams run down her oiled umbrella's sides. Big Endians and small Endians. Very few men, properly speaking, live at present, but are providing to live another time. I forget whether advice be among the lost things which Ariosto says are to be found in the moon, that in time ought to have been there. The motives of the best actions will not bear too strict an inquiry. It is allowed that the cause of most actions, good or bad, may be resolved into the love of ourselves, but the self-love of some men inclines them to please others, and the self-love of others is wholly employed in pleasing themselves. This makes the great distinction between virtue and vice. The system of morality to be gathered from the ancient sages falls very short of that delivered in the Gospel. The example alone of a vicious prince will corrupt an age, but that of a good one will not reform it. He that calls a man ungrateful sums up all the veil that a man can be guilty of. One principal object of good breeding is to suit our behavior to the three several degrees of men, our superiors, our equals, and those below us. There never appear more than 5 or 6 men of genius in an age, but if they were united the world could not stand before them. Every age might perhaps produce 1 or 2 geniuses, if they were not sunk under the censure and obloquy of plodding, servile, imitating pedants. Nothing is so great an instance of ill manners as flattery. Let a man be ne'er so wise, he may be caught with sober lies. A maxim in law has more weight in the world than an article of faith. A little grain of the romance is no ill ingredient to preserve and exalt the dignity of human nature, without which it is apt to degenerate into everything that is sordid, vicious and low. Patience alleviates, as impatience augments, pain. Thus persons of strong will suffer less than those who give way to irritation. Oh, how our neighbor lifts his nose, to tell what every schoolboy knows. A chuck under the chin is worth 2 kisses. Cruel people are ever cowards in emergency. Arbitrary power is but the first natural step from anarchy, or the savage life. A fig for your bill of fare, show me your bill of company. There seems to be no part of knowledge in fewer hands than that of discerning when to have done. Though Diogenes lived in a tub, there might be, for aught I know, as much pride under his rags, as in the fine-spun garments of the divine Plato. The axe of intemperance has lopped off his green boughs and left him a withered trunk. Perverseness is your whole defense. Orators inflame the people, whose anger is really but a short fit of madness. That incessant envy wherewith the common rate of mankind pursues all superior natures to their own. Liberty of conscience is nowadays only understood to be the liberty of believing what men please, but also of endeavoring to propagate that belief as much as they can. When I am in danger of bursting, I will go and whisper among the reeds. Under the rose, since here are none but friends, to own the truth we have some private ends. Satire, being levelled at all, is never resented for an offence by any. A wise man will find us to be rogues by our faces. The more careless, the more modish. Blot out, correct, insert, refine, enlarge, diminish, interline. Be mindful, when invention fails, to scratch your head and bite your nails. The sight of you is good for sore eyes. It is computed that 11,000 persons have at several times suffered death rather than submit to break their eggs at the smaller end. Lawyers are those whose interests and abilities lie in perverting, confounding, and eluding the law. By candlelight nobody would have taken you for above 25. This is every cook's opinion, no savory dish without an onion, but lest your kissing should be spoiled your onions must be fully boiled. In church your grandsire cut his throat, to do the job too long he tarried. He should have had my hearty vote to cut his throat before he married. There is no quality so contrary to any nature which one cannot affect, and put on upon occasion, in order to serve an interest. Where young must torture his invention to flatter knaves, or lose his pension. Come, agree, the law's costly. I hope you will be ready to own publicly, whenever you shall be called to it, that by your great and frequent urgency you prevailed on me to publish a very loose and uncorrect account of my travels, with directions to hire some young gentlemen of either university to put them in order, and correct the style, as my cousin Dampier did, by my advice, in his book called A Voyage Round the World. In like manner, the disbelief of a divine providence renders a man incapable of holding any public station, for, since kings avow themselves to be the deputies of providence. Lord, Madam, I have fed like a farmer, I shall grow as fat as a porpoise. I shall be like that tree, I shall die at the top. They have likewise discovered two lesser stars, or satellites, which revolve around Mars, whereof the innermost is distant from the center of the primary exactly 3 of his diameters, and the outermost 5, the former revolves in the space of 10 hours, and the latter in 21½ so that the squares of their periodical times are very near in the same proportion with the cubes of their distances from the center of Mars, which evidently shews them to be governed by the same law of gravitation that influences the other heavenly bodies. He had been 8 years upon a project for extracting sunbeams out of cucumbers, which were to be put into vials hermetically sealed, and let out to warm the air in raw, inclement summers. They say fingers were made before forks, and hands before knives. All panegyrics are mingled with an infusion of poppy. A stander-by may sometimes, perhaps, see more of the game than he that plays it. Old men and comets have been reverenced for the same reason, their long beards, and pretenses to foretell events. Life is a tragedy wherein we sit as spectators for a while and then act our part in it. Few are qualified to shine in company, but it is in most men's power to be agreeable. If the men of wit and genius would resolve never to complain in their works of critics and detractors, the next age would not know that they ever had any. For though, in nature, depth and height are equally held infinite, in poetry, the height we know, 'tis only infinite below. She has more goodness in her little finger than he has in his whole body. An excuse is a lie guarded. It is as hard to satirize well a man of distinguished vices, as to praise well a man of distinguished virtues. A footman may swear, but he cannot swear like a lord. He can swear as often, but can he swear with equal delicacy, propriety, and judgment? Nor do they trust their tongue alone, but speak a language of their own, can read a nod, a shrug, a look, far better than a printed book, convey a libel in a frown, and wink a reputation down. Time is painted with a lock before, and bald behind, signifying thereby that we must take time by the forelock, for, when it is once past, there is no recalling it. There is no vice which humankind carries to such wild extremes as that of avarice. O Grub Street! How do I bemoan thee, whose graceless children scorn to own thee? Yet thou hast greater cause to be ashamed of them, than they of thee. Pedantry is properly the overrating of any kind of knowledge we pretend to. I won't quarrel with my bread and butter. I hate nobody, I am in charity with the world. I always love to begin a journey on Sundays, because I shall have the prayers of the Church to preserve all that travel by land, or water. Do you think I was born in a wood to be afraid of an owl? In all distresses of our friends we first consult our private ends, while nature, kindly bent to ease us, points out some circumstance to please us. Usually speaking, the worst-bred person in company is a young traveler just returned from abroad. So geographers, in Africa maps, with savage pictures fill their gaps, and o'er uninhabitable downs place elephants for want of towns. For, what though his head be empty, provided his commonplace book be full? If the world had but a dozen Arbuthnets I would burn my Gulliver's Travels. Rebukes are easy from our betters, from men of quality and letters, but when low dunces will affront, what man alive can stand the brunt? Your notions of friendship are new to me. I believe every man is born with his quantum, and he cannot give to one without robbing another. I very well know to whom I would give the first place in my friendship, but they are not in the way, I am condemned to another scene, and therefore I distribute it in pennyworths to those about me, and who displease me least, and should do the same to my fellow prisoners if I were condemned to a jail. Dignity, high station, or great riches, are in some sort necessary to old men, in order to keep the younger at a distance, who are otherwise too apt to insult them upon the score of their age. I have known some men possessed of good qualities which were very serviceable to others, but useless to themselves, like a sundial on the front of a house, to inform the neighbors and passengers, but not the owner within. A secret is seldom safe in more than one breast. It is in disputes as in armies, where the weaker side sets up false lights, and makes a great noise, to make the enemy believe them more numerous and strong than they really are. I love good creditable acquaintance, I love to be the worst of the company. Reasoning will never make a man correct an ill opinion, which by reasoning he never acquired. Two friendships in two breasts requires the same aversions and desires. All fits of pleasure are balanced by an equal degree of pain and languor. It's like spending this year part of next year's revenue. In all I wish, how happy should I be, thou grand deluder, were it not for thee. So weak thou art that fools thy power despise, and yet so strong, thou triumph'st o'er the wise. For poetry, he's past his prime, he takes an hour to find a rhyme, his fire is out, his wit decayed, his fancy sunk, his muse a jade. I'd have him throw away his pen, but there's no talking to some men. Party is the madness of many for the gain of a few. Everybody wants to live forever, but nobody wants to grow old. For the rest, whatever we have got has been by infinite labor, and search, and ranging through every corner of nature. The difference is that instead of dirt and poison, we have rather chosen to fill our hives with honey and wax, thus furnishing mankind with the two noblest of things, which are sweetness and light. Whoever wishes to win in this game must have patience and money, since the values are so little constant and the rumors so little founded on truth. Vision is the art of seeing things invisible. A carpenter is known by his chips. The best maxim I know in this life is, to drink your coffee when you can, and when you cannot, to be easy without it. A fig for partridges and quails, ye dainties, I know nothing of ye, but on the highest mount in Wales would choose in peace to drink my coffee. I love white Portugal wine better than claret, champagne, or Burgundy. I have a sad vulgar appetite. The two maxims of any great man at court are, always to keep his countenance, and never to keep his word. Who can deny that all men are violent lovers of the truth, when we see them so positive in their errors, which they will maintain out of their zeal for truth, although they contradict themselves every day of their lives? No preacher is listened to but time, which gives us the same train and turn of thought that elder people have in vain tried to put into our heads before. Love of flattery, in most men, proceeds from the mean opinion they have of themselves, in women, from the contrary. Nothing more unqualified the man to act with prudence than a misfortune that is attended with shame and guilt. If we take an examination of what is understood by happiness, we shall find all its properties, under this short definition, that it is a perpetual possession of being well deceived. Bachelor's fare, bread and cheese, and kisses. Undoubtedly, philosophers are in the right when they tell us that nothing is great or little otherwise than by comparison. Some men, under the notion of weeding out prejudice, eradicate virtue, honesty, and religion. Punning is a talent which no man affects to despise but he that is without it. I remember it was with extreme difficulty that I could bring my master to understand the meaning of the word opinion, or how a point could be disputable, because reason taught us to affirm or deny only where we are certain, and beyond our knowledge we cannot do either. If a man makes me keep my distance, the comfort is, he keeps his at the same time. That was excellently observed, say I, when I read a passage in an author, where his opinion agrees with mine. When we differ, there I pronounce him to be mistaken. Fine words. I wonder where you stole them. Judges are picked out from the most dexterous lawyers, who are grown old or lazy, and having been biased all their lives against truth or equity, are under such a fatal necessity of favoring fraud, perjury, and oppression, that I have known several of them to refuse a large bribe from the side where justice lay, rather than injure the faculty by doing anything unbecoming their nature in office. I cannot but conclude that the bulk of your natives, to be the most pernicious race of little odious vermin that nature ever suffered to crawl upon the surface of the earth. Ever eating, never cloying, all devouring, all destroying, never finding full repast, till I eat the world at last. Satire is a sort of glass wherein beholders do generally discover everybody's face but their own, which is the chief reason for that kind reception it meets with in the world, and that so very few are offended with it. Ingratitude is amongst them a capital crime, as we read it to have been in some other countries, for they reason thus, that whoever makes ill returns to his benefactor, must needs be a common enemy to the rest of the mankind, from where he has received no obligations, and therefore such man is not fit to live. Happiness is the perpetual possession of being well deceived. She wears her clothes as if they were thrown on with a pitchfork. Men who possess all the advantages of life are in a state where there are many accidents to disorder and discompose, but few to please them. If a man would register all his opinions upon love, politics, religion, learning, etc., beginning from his youth, and so go to old age, what a bundle of inconsistencies and contradictions would appear at last. How is it possible to expect that mankind will take advice when they will not so much as take warning? Those dreams that on the silent night intrude, and with false flitting shapes our minds delude, are mere productions of the brain, and fools consult interpreters in vain. But you think that it is time for me to have done with the world, and so I would if I could get into a better before I was called into the best, and not die here in a rage, like a poisoned rat in a hole. For in that universal call, few bankers will to heaven be mounters, they'll cry, ye shops, upon us fall. Conceal and cover us, ye counters. When other hands the scales shall hold, and they, in men's and angels' sight produced with all their bills and gold, weighed in the balance and found light. For want of a block, man will stumble at a straw. It often happens that, if a lie be believed only for an hour, it has done its work, and there is no further occasion for it. An atheist has got one point beyond the devil. What vexes me most is, that my female friends, who could bear me very well a dozen years ago, have now forsaken me. Although I am not so old in proportion to them as I formerly was, which I can prove by arithmetic, for then I was double their age, which now I am not. Letter to Alexander Pope. February 7, 1736. I've often wished that I had clear, for life, £600 a year, a handsome house to lodge a friend, a river at my garden's end, a terrace walk, and half a rood of land set out to plant a wood. She's no chicken, she's on the wrong side of 30, if she be a day. Is an old maxim in the schools, that flattery is the food of fools, yet now and then your men of wit will condescend to take a bit. If they would, for example, praise the beauty of a woman, or any other animal, they describe it by rhombs, circles, parallelograms, ellipses, and other geometrical terms. Brutes find out where their talents lie. A bear will not attempt to fly, a foundered horse will oft debate before he tries a 5-barred gate. A dog by instinct turns aside who sees the ditch too deep and wide, but man we find the only creature who, led by folly, combats nature, who, when she loudly cries forbear, with obstinacy fixes there, and where the genius least inclines, absurdly bends his whole designs. It is likewise to be observed that this society hath a peculiar chant and jargon of their own, that no other mortal can understand, and wherein all their laws are written, which they take special care to multiply. Pray steal me not, I'm Mrs. Dingley's, whose heart in this 4-footed thing lies. A ridiculous passion which hath no being but in playbooks and romances. I row after health like a waterman. There's none so blind as they that won't see. Seamen have a custom, when they meet a whale, to fling him out an empty tub by way of amusement, to divert him from laying violent hands upon the ship. The preaching of divines helps to preserve well-inclined men in the course of virtue, but seldom or ever reclaims the vicious. I know Sir John will go, though he was sure it would rain cats and dogs. She watches him as a cat would watch a mouse. What some people invent the rest enlarge. A favor is half granted, when graciously refused. When we desire or solicit anything, our minds run wholly on the good side or circumstances of it. When it is obtained, our minds run wholly on the bad ones. When men grow virtuous in their old age, they only make a sacrifice to God of the devil's leavings. All pretenses of foretelling by astrology are deceits, for this manifest reason, because the wise and learned, who can only judge whether there be any truth in this science, Do all unanimously agree to laugh at and despise it, and none but the poor ignorant vulgar give it any credit. The sciences are found, like Hercules's oxen, by tracing them backward, and old sciences are unraveled like old stockings, by beginning at the foot. This single stick, which you now behold ingloriously lying in that neglected corner, I once knew in a flourishing state in a forest. It was full of sap, full of leaves, and full of boughs, but now, in vain does the busy art of man pretend to vie with nature, by tying that withered bundle of twigs to its sapless trunk. It is at best but the reverse of what it was, a tree turned upside down, the branches on the earth, and the root in the air. Argument, as usually managed, is the worst sort of conversation, as in books it is generally the worst sort of reading. Polite conversation, 'tis happy for him, that his father was before him. My horses understand me tolerably well, I converse with them at least 4 hours every day. They are strangers to bridle or saddle, they live in great amity with me, and friendship of each other. All human race would be wits, and millions miss, for one that hits. I will venture to affirm, that the 3 seasons wherein our corn has miscarried did no more contribute to our present misery, than 1 spoonful of water thrown upon a rat already drowned would contribute to his death, and that the present plentiful harvest, although it should be followed by a dozen ensuing, would no more restore us, than it would the rat aforesaid to put him near the fire, which might indeed warm his fur coat, but never bring him back to life. Reason is a very light rider, and easily shook off. There are certain common privileges of a rider, the benefit whereof, I hope, there will be no reason to doubt, particularly, that where I am not understood, it shall be concluded, that something very useful and profound is couched underneath, and again, that whatever word or sentence is printed in a different character, shall be judged to contain something extraordinary either or wit of sublime. You cannot reason a person out of something they were not reasoned into. Bread is the staff of life. From not the gravest of divines, except for once some serious lines. I used to wonder how a man of birth and spirit could endure to be wholly insignificant and obscure in a foreign country, when he might live with luster in his own. The chameleon, who is said to feed upon nothing but air, has of all animals the nimblest tongue. Whoever excels in what we prize, appears a hero in our eyes. Each girl, when pleased with what is taught, will have the teacher in her thought. A blockhead with melodious voice, in boarding schools may have his choice. The common fluency of speech in many men, and most women, is owing to a scarcity of matter and a scarcity of words, for whosoever is a master of language, and hath a mind full of ideas, will be apt, in speaking, to hesitate upon the choice of both. Brisk talkers are usually slow thinkers. There is, indeed, no wild beast more to be dreaded than a communicative man having nothing to communicate. If you are civil to the voluble, they will abuse your patience; if brusque, your character. Brisk talkers are generally slow thinkers. Have you not observed that there is a lower kind of discretion and regularity, which seldom fails of raising men to the highest station in the court, the church, and the law? It is a miserable thing to live in suspense; it is the life of the spider. Exploding many things under the name of trifles is a very false proof either of wisdom or magnanimity, and a great check to virtuous actions with regard to fame. Men always grow vicious before they become unbelievers. There is no vice or folly that requires so much nicety and skill to manage as vanity, nor any which by ill management makes so contemptible a figure. Everyone desires long life, not one old age. Praise is the daughter of present power. No man will take counsel, but every man will take money. Therefore, money is better than counsel. When we are old, our friends find it difficult to please us, and are less concerned whether we be pleased or not. Two women seldom grow intimate but at the expense of a third person. Perpetual aiming at wit is a very bad part of conversation. It is done to support a character; it generally fails; it is a sort of insult on the company, and a restraint upon the speaker. I cannot imagine why we should be at the expense to furnish wit for succeeding ages, when the former have made no sort of provision for ours. Vanity is a natural object of temptation to a woman. The scholars of Ireland seem not to have the least conception of style, but run on in a flat phraseology, often mingled with barbarous terms. Simplicity, without which no human performance can arrive at perfection. An English tongue, if refined to a certain standard, might perhaps be fixed forever. No man of honor, as the word is usually understood, did ever pretend that his honor obliged him to be chaste or temperate, to pay his creditors, to be useful to his country, to do good to mankind, to endeavor to be wise or learned, to regard his word, his promise, or his oath. So endless and exorbitant are the desires of men that they will grasp at all, and can form no scheme of perfect happiness with less. Great abilities, when employed as God directs, do but make the owners of them greater and more painful servants to their neighbors. When any one person or body of men seize into their hands the power in the last resort, there is properly no longer a government, but what Aristotle and his followers call the abuse and corruption of one. It may pass for a maxim in state, that the administration cannot be placed in too few hands, nor the legislature in too many. Hereditary right should be kept sacred, not from any inalienable right in a particular family, but to avoid the consequences that usually attend the ambition of competitors. Some dire misfortune to portend, no enemy can match a friend. Pride, ill nature, and want of sense are the three great sources of ill manners. Without some one of these defects, no man will behave himself ill for want of experience, or what, in the language of fools, is called knowing the world. In men desire begets love, and in women love begets desire. Love why do we one passion call, when 'tis a compound of them all? Where hot and cold, where sharp and sweet, in all their equipages meet, where pleasures mixed with pains appear, sorrow with joy, and hope with fear. Storytelling is subject to two unavoidable defects: frequent repetition and being soon exhausted, so that, whoever values this gift in himself, has need of a good memory, and ought frequently to shift his company. The ruin of a state is generally preceded by an universal degeneracy of manners and contempt of religion. Whence proceeds this weight we lay on what detracting people say? Their utmost malice cannot make your head, or tooth, or finger ache, nor spoil your shapes, distort your face, or put one feature out of place. Fond of those hives where folly reigns, and cards and scandal are the chains, where the pert virgin slights a name, and scorns to redden into shame. Old sciences are unraveled like old stockings, by beginning at the foot. A prince, the moment he is crowned, inherits every virtue sound, as emblems of the sovereign power, like other baubles in a tower, is generous, valiant, just, and wise, and so continues till he dies. It is the first rule in oratory that a man must appear such as he would persuade others to be, and that can be accomplished only by the force of his life. I with borrowed silver shine, what you see is none of mine. First I show you but a quarter, like the bough that guards the Tartar, then the half, and then the whole, ever dancing round the pole. Fools are apt to imitate only the defects of their betters. Live every day as your last, because one of these days, it will be. Your onions should be thoroughly boiled. Whoever makes the fewest persons uneasy, is the best bred man in company. When a man is made a spiritual peer he loses his surname, when a temporal, his Christian name. Whatever the poets pretend, it is plain they give immortality to none but themselves. It is Homer and Virgil we reverence and admire, not Achilles or Aeneas. With historians it is quite the contrary. Our thoughts are taken up with the actions, persons, and events we read, and we little regard the authors. What we call the Irish brogue is no sooner discovered, than it makes the deliverer, in the last degree, ridiculous and despised, and, from such a mouth, an Englishman expects nothing but bulls, blunders, and follies. It is remarkable with what Christian fortitude and resignation we can bear the suffering of other folks. Real vision is the ability to see the invisible. Tea is as cheap sitting as standing. Arbitrary power is the natural object of temptation to a prince, as wine and women to a young fellow, or a bribe to a judge, or avarice to old age. My hunger serves me instead of a clock. God hath intended our passions to prevail over reason. To acknowledge you were wrong yesterday is simply to let the world know that you are wiser today than you were then. Physicians ought not to give their judgment of religion, for the same reason that butchers are not admitted to be jurors upon life and death. I have now lost my barrier between me and death. God grant I may live to be as well prepared for it, as I confidently believe her to have been. If the way to heaven be through piety, truth, justice, and charity, she is there. If a man will observe as he walks the streets, I believe he will find the merriest countenances in mourning coaches. An intelligent person should put money in the beginning, but not in heart. When a real genius appears in this world, you'll know him by the fact that all the fools have allied against him. When a man of genius appears in the world, it is immediately recognized by the fact that all the blockheads join forces against him. Vision is seeing the invisible. My lawyer, being practiced almost from his cradle in defending falsehood, is quite out of his element when he would be an advocate for justice, which is an office unnatural. He always attempts with great awkwardness if not with ill will. Desponding Phyllis was endued with every talent of a prude. She trembled when a man drew near, salute her, and she turned her ear. If o'er against her you were placked, she durst not look above your waist. Sweeping from butchers' stalls, dung, guts, and blood, drowned puppies, stinking sprats, all drenched in mud, dead cats, and turnip tops, come tumbling down the flood. Careful observers may foretell the hour, by sure prognostics, when to dread a shower. While rain depends, the pensive cat gives o'er her frolics, and pursues her tail no more. And, is not virtue in mankind the nutriment that feeds the mind? Vain men delight in telling what honors have been done them, what great company they have kept, and the like, by which they plainly confess that these honors were more than their due, and such as their friends would not believe if they had not been told, whereas a man truly proud thinks the greatest honors below his merit, and consequently scorns to boast. I therefore deliver it as a maxim that whoever desires the character of a proud man ought to conceal his vanity. Triumphant Tories, and desponding Whigs, forget their feuds, and join to save their wigs. This day, whatever the fates decree, shall still be kept with joy by me. This day then, let us not be told, that you are sick, and I grown old. With a whirl of thought oppressed I sink from reverie to rest. An horrid vision seized my head, I saw the graves give up their dead. Come hither, all ye empty things, ye bubbles riced by breath of kings, who float upon the tide of state, come hither, and behold your fate. Let pride be taught by this rebuke, how very mean a thing's a duke, from all his ill-got honors flung, turn to that dirt from whence he sprung. Apollo was held the god of physic and sender of disease. Both were originally the same trade, and still continue. Kitchen physic is the best physic. When you set about your composing, it may be necessary for your ease, and better distillation of wit, to put on your worst clothes, and the worse the better, for an author, like a Limbeck, will yield the better for having a rag about him. Besides that, I have observed a gardener cut the outward rind of a tree, which is the surtout of it, to make it bear well, and this is a natural account of the usual poverty of poets, and is an argument why wits, of all men living, ought to be ill-clad. You can't make a silk purse out of a sow's ear. Venus, a beautiful, good-natured lady, was the goddess of love, Juno, a terrible shrew, the goddess of marriage, and they were always mortal enemies. Lose no time to contradict her, nor endeavor to convict her, only take this rule along, always to advise her wrong, and reprove her when she's right. She may then grow wise for spite. Daphne knows, with equal ease, how to vex and how to please, but the folly of her sex makes her sole delight to vex. Politics, as the word is commonly understood, are nothing but corruptions, and consequently of no use to a good king or a good ministry, for which reason courts are so overrun with politics. I can discover no political evil in suffering bullies, sharpers, and rakes to rid the world of each other by a method of their own, where the law hath not been able to find an expedient. Every day is an opportunity to make a new happy ending. May you live all the days of your life. What poet would not grieve to see his brother write as well as he? But rather than they should excel, he'd wish his rivals all in hell. I am of the level with common astrologers, who, with an old paltry cant, and a few pothooks for planets to amuse the vulgar, have too long been suffered to abuse the world. Say, Britain, could you ever boast 3 poets in an age at most? Our chilling climate hardly bears a sprig of bays in 50 years. I'm up and down and roundabout, yet all the world can't find me out, though hundreds have employed their leisure, they never yet could find my measure. Hail fellow, well met. Nature has left every man a capacity of being agreeable, though not of shining in company, and there are 100 men sufficiently qualified for both who, by a very few faults, that they might correct in half an hour, are not so much as tolerable. Abstracts, abridgments, summaries, etc., have the same use with burning glasses to collect the diffused light rays of wit and learning in authors, and make them point with warmth and quickness upon the reader's imagination. I'll give you leave to call me anything, if you don't call me Spade. Quotations are best brought in to confirm some opinion controverted. Strange an astrologer should die, without one wonder in the sky. I never knew any man cured of inattention. Would a writer know how to behave himself with relation to posterity? Let him consider in old books what he finds that he is glad to know, and what omissions he most laments. A poor spirit is poorer than a poor purse. A very few pounds a year would ease a man of the scandal of avarice. The translators of the Bible were masters of an English style much fitter for that work than any we see in our present writings, the which is owing to the simplicity that runs through the whole. The affectation of some late authors to introduce and multiply cant words is the most ruinous corruption in any language. In all assemblies, though you wedge them ever so close, we may observe this peculiar property, that over their heads there is room enough, but how to reach it is the difficult point. To this end the philosopher's way in all ages has been by erecting certain edifices in the air. There are but 3 ways for a man to revenge himself of the censure of the world: to despise it, to return the like, or to endeavor to live so as to avoid it. The first of these is usually pretended, the last is almost impossible. The universal practice is for the second. Such a man, truly wise, creams off nature, leaving the sour and the dregs for philosophy and reason to lap up. Unjustly poets we asperse, truth shines the brighter clad in verse, and all the fictions they pursue do but insinuate what is true. Common fluency of speech in many men and most women is owing to a scarcity of matter. Not die here in a rage, like a poisoned rat in a hole. 'Tis nothing when you are used to it. A jargon formed from the lost language, wit, confounded in that babble of the pit, formed by diseased conceptions, weak and wild, sick lust of souls, and an abortive child, born between whores and fops, by lewd compacts, before the play, or else between the acts. Nor wonder, If from such polluted minds should spring such short and transitory kinds, I would rather be a freeman among slaves than a slave among freemen. It is an uncontrolled truth, that no man ever made an ill figure who understood his own talents, nor a good one who mistook them. Last week I saw a woman flayed, and you will hardly believe how much it altered her person for the worse. Walls have tongues, and hedges ears. When dunces are satiric, I take it for a panegyric. Hobbes clearly proves that every creature lives in a state of war by nature. You must take the will for the deed. Brutes find out where their talents lie, a bear will not attempt to fly. The latter part of a man's life is taken up in curing the follies, prejudices, and false opinions he had contracted in the former.